record. He has called himself a Vietnam Times veteran, also referring to himself as a recon ranger. There is no such category within the United States Marine Corps. Both the New York Times and the Washington Post have issued corrections regarding their calling him a Vietnam veteran. So more to come on that. Very quiet day, as I said. Things are basically closed off here at the Covington Catholic High School right now. Reporters are gathering in front yards of people here because any available parking lot to set up your equipment is unavailable, blocked off by police. Very, very secure here, and I think the students appreciate that. Back to you, Bill.
A lot of layers on the story. Thank you, Doug. Doug McKelvey, good to have you there. How you doing? Good morning to you.
Hey,
I want to go back to the
Morning.
Covington story. Got a number of things I want you to reflect on. Wall Street Journal headline from late last night, the high school deplorables, it writes, MAGA hats, the March for Life, Covington Catholic, and the mob. How has this story developed by the day, do you believe?
Well, it began with a snippet that looked bad. A lot of people went out and condemned it, including myself on Twitter. And then additional evidence trickled in. And that evidence over time has, I think, very clearly showed that these kids were wronged here. They were not this pack of aggressive, race-baiting teenagers that they were portrayed as. They were just standing around waiting for a bus, being berated by this bizarre fringe group of homophobic racists for a long time, and then Mr. Phillips came in with the drum.
And that's the part of the story that I think has been lost in all this.
Yes.
And that's the Black Hebrew Israelites that happened long before this. You go online and you can, this runs for an hour and 15 minutes, Guy. So these are the Black Hebrew Israelites. They're grown adults. They have extreme views. They're clearly racist. They're clearly anti-gay. They're anti-white. They're agitators of the highest form.
Right.
And they were the initial ones who provoked this long before the Native American came on.
Absolutely.
With his drum. Now, with that, I want to go back to the Wall Street Journal editorial from earlier today. The boys have been taunted by a group of Black Hebrew Israelites who shouted racist and homophobic slurs. Far from the boys confronting Mr. Phillips, he confronts them as they were waiting near the Lincoln Memorial for their bus. It continues. On the whole, these teenagers were calm amid the provocations and far less incendiary than the adults who taunted them and the progressive high priest who denounced them. They're talking about their school and the leaders of the Archdiocese back in northern Kentucky. Grant Hillman is a student. He was on earlier today on Fox and Friends and described the reaction many of them are getting and their families back home.
The threats, they've been horrible. I've never heard such cruel things wished upon another human being. It ranges from getting locked inside a building and burned alive to sexually assaulted by the clergy members. It's just awful.
Now we have this wicked stew, Guy, of initial reaction that goes viral and a story that waits to be unfolded, and it takes days for it to be told.
And yet all this evidence has come out, Bill, that I think is very exculpatory for the kids in this case, and the Wall Street Journal editorial is exactly right in terms of the details and really who's at fault here. And despite all of that evidence, yesterday that school had to be shut down because of the threats that we just heard about, which is absolutely disgusting. Even if you believe, if you want to believe against all odds and against the evidence that we've seen that the kids are the bad guys here, which they're not, a response of death threats is bizarre and horrible and completely unforgivable. So this is an example of people seeing what they wanted to believe about a bunch of white, male, young Trump supporters jumping to their foregone conclusion that confirmed all of their priors about who these kids are and what they would do, and people, too many of them, are clinging to that narrative even though it has been thoroughly debunked by video.
Guy, thank you. I wanted to ask you about the shutdown, but I said the State of our Union is
not going away, I don't think.
The State of our Union is stalled for today.
Yeah.
Thank you.